Reneo is a clinical stage pharmaceutical company focused on the development and commercialization of therapies for patients with rare genetic mitochondrial diseases. And with me is Greg Flesher, the president and CEO, to talk more about Reneo and I guess give us a brief overview of the company and your approach to developing these therapies.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me here this morning. Reneo Pharmaceuticals, as you mentioned, is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company developing drugs for rare diseases, which are defined in the United States by being less than 200,000 patients in the U.S. And our lead program is in mitochondrial disease, as you had mentioned again. And we are addressing a condition in which patients with this disease cannot metabolize the foods they eat. And so their cells don't get the energy when they need it. And the tissue, of course, suffers, and the patients have a whole host of morbidities and shortened life expectancy due to the disease.
Very interesting. What is the name of the disease?
Primary mitochondrial myopathy, or PMM, to make it a little easier. Yeah.
Okay, and you mentioned how it affects patients, and it's genetic. So this is something that, you know, I guess, can you detect that somebody has this gene, and then what happens?
Yeah. So fortunately, PMM can be detected through genetic testing, either saliva or blood samples today. That wasn't the case 20 years ago. That is something that has evolved over the last 15 years or so. So it's an easy diagnosis to make in patients, although it does take patients quite a long time to go through the medical journey. The disease presents usually in adolescence or early childhood as underdeveloped skeletal muscle, as extreme fatigue and weakness. As the child grows into adolescence and early adulthood, you tend to see other morbidity in other organ systems like the heart or the brain that make the patient really disabled. No,
I mean, this sounds like a very serious thing.
It is, yes.
How many people are affected by this?
So in the United States, we estimate there are 60 to 70,000 patients with PMM that are living today. And there are no approved therapies, which is kind of exciting for us as a company developing what could be the first potential treatment option for these patients.
Okay, and is this called mavodelpar?
Absolutely. Correct.
Yes,
mavodelpar. So mavodelpar is the name of our investigational drug that is in a pivotal clinical trial right now. We announced earlier this year that we fully enrolled that clinical study. We're down to the last handful of patients that will complete the study in the coming weeks, and we'll have data by the end of the year.
Yeah. How does this therapy work?
So this therapy works. It's an oral treatment. It's going to be a tablet. If it's commercially available, it'll be a tablet that you take once a day. And when you take the product, it tells your cells to produce more energy. And the way it does that is it causes the transcription of genes that produce the machinery that metabolize the nutrients that we eat. So these patients, we've seen in earlier studies, the result of taking this drug, it appears that they have much more energy. They can perform functional tests to a greater degree. They have a pretty significant reduction in symptoms, the most common being fatigue, lack of energy, and weakness. And if we see that, of course, in this pivotal clinical trial, that will be very powerful data to take to regulators.
Now, this is the STRIDE study.
Correct.
That is currently ongoing. Which phase is it in?
So it's a phase 2B study, but it is a pivotal trial, meaning that regulators have deemed that if we are successful with this study, along with some open label extension data that we'll get from a long-term exposure study, that would be sufficient for registration and review of our application.
Okay, and you mentioned that you expect some top-line results by the end of this year?
We do. So we're guiding to the Q4, which is almost upon us, but it's probably going to be in the back half of the quarter based on these last handful of patients coming out of the study.
And then what happens once you have those results?
Yeah, assuming the data is good, then we have a lot of work to do. The R&D team back at Reneo will be assembling a package of information to present to regulators. Typically, the next step is having what's called a pre-NDA meeting with the FDA, so pre-new drug application, in which you're trying to have a discussion with them to ensure that your package of data is sufficient for filing and for review. If the answer is yes, after that, within a short time after that meeting, we will be filing in the U.S. We have said publicly that we expect to file in the first half of 2024. And the FDA then gives you what's called a PDUFA date at some point in the future. And that PDUFA date is when they make a decision on your drug. And that will probably come at the end of calendar 24 or very early 25.
Okay. And then once that happens, is it available to be prescribed?
Yes. Okay. So once you have approval from any regulator in the world, we'll say the FDA in this example, you have the ability then to distribute your drug through commercial channels in the U.S. Because it's a rare disease and because the product itself is so important for patients, our distribution will not be through retail pharmacies like Walgreens or CVS, but will be through a specialty pharmacy network.
Okay.
And that's really good because specialty pharmacies have relationships with the offices, the physician offices across the country. And so instead of writing a prescription that you take to your pharmacy, the physician's office or the patient will call a 1-800 number. They'll talk to someone. They'll handhold them through the process of working through their insurers and their payers and making sure they get the drug on a regular cycle. So it's a much more one-to-one personal relationship with your pharmacy than you would with general distribution.
Would you ever go to another country and have this
yes.
regulated?
So our clinical study is being conducted on a global basis. So we're doing our pivotal trial in 14 countries around the world at almost 40 sites. So the data that we will collect from this clinical study should be sufficient to file in all areas of the world. We as a company, we're fairly small. So we're about 60 employees today, probably growing to 200 to 300 in the near future. We will develop and commercialize in the U.S., in the major markets in Western Europe, but we're going to seek partners for other parts of the world where they already have the infrastructure in place and could easily get this to patients at a much more cost-effective manner.
What is the current standard of care for people who have PMM?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no approved treatment options, so the disease will progress over time. But patients are prescribed, they call it a mito cocktail, which is a combination of supplements, herbs, and vitamins that you can get at pharmacies, the vitamin shop, and so forth, to sort of supplement your diet to try to give you a little bit more energy. But to date, that's not been shown to be effective as a long-term treatment option.
Interesting. Are there other mitochondrial diseases you might be able to use this application for?
Yes. So if the drug works, if we prove out our theory that the drug can enhance energy production in the patients with primary mitochondrial myopathy, there are other diseases, genetic diseases, rare diseases, in which patients can't metabolize, say, carbohydrates or fatty acids or other aspects of their diet. And so we can then approach other indications one by one. We have a library of compounds besides mavodelpar that we can bring forward to do this, and we probably will over the course of time.
Okay, and then tell me a little bit about you. What brought you to the company, and what inspired you to be the CEO, and how long have you been in this position?
Believe it or not, 28 years. So I've been doing drug development for 28 years. By academic background, I'm a biochemist and molecular biologist. But I started my industry career in the 1990s at Eli Lilly in Indiana. So
yes,
a very
Indiana,
wonderful company.
So very familiar with Eli Lilly.
A wonderful company and a great training ground. And over those 28 years, I've been at 6 different companies. I sort of went from large pharma to really small emerging pharma because I like the cutting edge science. Yeah. I like the idea of developing novel therapies for which treatments don't exist. And I've been fortunate enough in my career that I've been on several programs which are first-to-market products that, for the patients, there were nothing prior. So what brought me to Reneo is when I was interviewing and speaking to the board of directors about the opportunity, I was able to see some of the early data. And I was able to see the regulatory correspondence and how collaborative the FDA and European regulators were. And what the company needed was people, resources, and money. And I'm pretty good historically at being able to bring those things together and making sure the company has the best chance of success. And so I took the opportunity, and of course, being able to develop one more drug that is needed for patients really was a driver.
Yeah, well, and even though it's a small amount of people, it is absolutely life-changing for them. So important work. Thank you so much, Greg, for coming in.
Yeah, thank you very much.